bad year of 2020 allowed us to do a trial in a field that we decided to leave fallow and not plant in the spring of 2020. What we decided to do in the end is leave that through and wait until this autumn to establish a winter wheat crop. What we did prior to that was we split the field up into 3 treatments. One, we would plant a home-saved mix of beans and barley. One, we would plant a bought-in mix of phacelia and fodder radish. And the other treatment, we would monitor how a natural regen on a true fallow would affect the ground, the soil, what nutrients were recoverable, what it did to the soil profile, and how the winter wheat crop established in it afterwards. It's very much the beginning of our learning into these sort of green crops where we haven't done a lot of it before at all. We've not got livestock in the system, so we've not had a sort of interim crop before. So I'm trying to see whether it will help us use fallow as another cropping option going forward. Maybe we don't crop certain parts of the farm, leave it in a fallow situation, but plant a crop in it late spring in order to condition the soil, take some of the moisture out of the soil, and hopefully hold on to some of the nutrients within it. So three different treatments, each replicated twice, randomly across the field. The field itself is quite varying in soil type, so we've got some lighter land up on the top of the hill, and then a bank that runs down into some very heavy Evesham series clays. Very, very wet field as well, so it was a good field to try this on. Treatments randomly set out across the field, established back in the spring, early summer of 2020. It did come very dry after we planted them, so they did take quite a while to establish, but eventually they got going, and there was some really good biomass there.
The catch crops were slow to establish due to drilling into a dry seedbed, but after some well-needed rain in June, they rapidly grew to give almost 90% cover by July. The farm-saved beans and barley mix produced the greatest amount of cover and above-ground biomass, followed closely by the phacelia and oil radish mix, with weed and volunteer growth on the control treatment resulting in about 60% cover.
We noticed, so what we did when we sprayed the crop off, we then had to mow some of it because there was quite a lot of biomass there, and we wouldn't have been able to work the ground with the machinery that we've got with the amount of biomass. I also wanted to break it down as much as possible, so when we incorporate it into the ground, into the soil, it breaks down quite quickly.
By the time Rob came to spray the covers off in early July, they had produced between 2.5 to 3 tonnes of above ground biomass and taken up between 80 and 90 kilograms per hectare of nitrogen, compared to just 50 kilograms of nitrogen taken up by the weeds on the control treatment. We will be continuing to monitor this trial over the next growing season and have just been out to measure soil structural condition following the different catch crop treatments. We will measure spring soil nitrogen supply ahead of fertiliser applications next year, and also look to see if there are any differences in winter wheat yields.
So at this stage it's really early on, because we want to see how the winter wheat crop that's in the ground now is how that develops, and whether it develops differently behind some of the treatments. But one thing we certainly did notice is when we were turning the soil over, creating a seed bed for that winter wheat crop, we noticed the ground worked a lot better where we had the beans and the barley mixed. The roots of the beans in particular were doing their own job on that top 2 or 3 inches of soil. Where the ground had just been left to naturally regenerate as a fallow, there was a lot of weed cover, a lot of charlock, blackgrass, volunteer cereals from last year. There was a certain amount there, nowhere near the biomass of the other 2 treatments. And that ground was a lot sadder, it was a lot wetter, it took more horsepower to put the machine through it. So even early on we're noticing some difference in how we can perhaps work the ground differently in front of the next crop. I'm really looking forward to see how this catch crop trial will affect the way that we grow our crops, and hopefully it will have an impact on how the winter wheat crop is established this year, and it'll be really interesting to see those results going forward.